Here we go， 起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传师一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下 ，Please be seated. Bill, I'm gonna mute myself, and please feel free to begin whenever you like.
Thanks so much, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Tao study group this morning. It is, as usual, a wonderful day here in Indianapolis, and now that I've gotten some stuff off my glasses, I can actually see. It's a sunny, about 80-degree day here. Humidity's low, temperature's wonderful. It's a great day to be alive. You know, I say that most every Sunday, I suppose, but the fact of the matter is that always beats the alternative. A couple of weeks ago, I got a special request to talk about dealing with negative emotions. And I thought that was a topic that was definitely worthy of discussing. And as I researched this talk, I realized that there is, in fact, a voluminous amount of material contained in the Tao Te Ching that talks about dealing with negative emotions, negative feelings, those sorts of things in a somewhat indirect manner, but still in a very tangible and real way. So much so that I had a tough time picking any one single chapter out of the Tao Te Ching to fully encapsulate this particular topic. And so with that in mind, I took everything that I'd read on it and everything that I researched in the Tao Te Ching and my own thoughts and opinions on the matter, and kind of coalesced them into this particular talk. It's an incredibly dense topic, and we're not going to be able to do it a full amount of justice in 30 minutes. But at least maybe we can cover some points to think about, some tips and things to help go from a negative mindset to a more positive mindset, and to help adjust our attitudes during times when life dishes us up lemons, as it were. I think the first fundamental question we have to ask, if we're going to treat this subject at all, is why is it that we have negative emotions to begin with? What is it that causes us to feel the way that we feel when things happen? And very often those feelings come about as the result of a couple of things. Our attachments is a huge one. The more attached that we are to things, people, outcomes, situations, the larger the opportunity for us to experience a lot of negative emotional states when things don't go our way. Attachments, of course, occur when we have a vested interest in the outcome of a situation, where we've made what we consider to be a substantial investment of time or resources, or both, or mental energy into a particular situation or thing. They come about when we have very strong feelings about particular things. That's not to say that that's bad. It is absolutely the truth that strong opinions and feelings are very oftentimes legitimate, and how a person feels is how a person feels. So we're not judging the emotion or the feeling, but rather citing it as causal sometimes in negative thinking. And then there's the item that I call caring for others. That probably should have been quoted. It is caring for others is that broad blanket of things that we do to other people under the guise of trying to improve their lives, where we really probably should have left things alone. But because we care for others, we browbeat them into either submission or argument, and meddle around in their affairs because we hope to improve them, because we want to fix them. And I'll tell you right now, just as a side note, fixing another human being is impossible. The only way that gets done is if the person wants to fix themselves. Then we have desires. Desires and attachments differ in that attachments usually deal with something that we already have in our lives. Desires very often deal with the things we want to have in our lives, or we think we want to have in our lives. For instance, the need to be right, or the need to feel special or important or in some way noticeable, the need to stand out from the crowd, if you will, or the need to impose our will on other people, that act of caring for others, as it were. Those things give rise to tremendous and very powerful negative emotional states, particularly when those desires go unrequited and we have to deal with not being able to have things the way that we want them. One of the other large contributors is our illusions of reality. The illusions that we control anything, or that we have power over anything or anyone, or that we own anything. Those three things are absolutely illusions of this existence. We don't own anything. We may have, while we exist for our brief 70 or 80 years, untold houses full of goodies, but the day we die, we can't take any of them with us. They all cease to be ours. The very best that we can hope for when it comes to our possessions is to rent them for a period of years. We own them for as long as this physical body exists, and when this physical body no longer exists, they go somewhere else. We don't have power over anything or anyone. The power that we think we have, particularly over people, is as fleeting as the blink of an eye and as illusory as a mirage. At the very best, when we try to lord power over another person, the best we can get is forced compliance and grudging action, but never cooperation, never full compliance, never any kind of oneness or unity. That is always a one-way street. And the same can be said for control. Trying to control situations and people always leads to manipulation and to activities that are not at the root of sagehood or even within congruence with the Tao teachings. And yet, how often we try to control the actions of others so that they behave in a way that we find to be acceptable or in keeping with what we would have people to do. Those three illusions, as long as we permit ourselves to live under them, are tremendous contributors to anxiety and stress and worry and negativity that can be virtually easily gotten rid of. The other category, the thing I call artifacts of the psyche, is much more difficult to be rid of, to change, because those things have been with us ever since birth. Those things are what we were taught to believe when we were, very young children, and how we see ourselves, our own self-image, the way that we think we are, as opposed to the way that others think we are, perhaps. The opinions of others is part of that, what we think others believe about us. The links to our past and the fears of our futures, those are all artifacts of the mind. And for the things that we began to acquire from birth, unlearning those things is very difficult and sometimes very painful. The process of introspection that allows us to free ourselves from the shackles of our past and to build a positive future are very strong sometimes. And sometimes, quite frankly, we are not the people that we think we are or that we think we should be. And changing ourselves from the person that we are to the person we think we ought to be can be difficult, humbling, painful. It can be trying. And there are not many people who can go through that process of brutal introspection and self-honesty and emerge from it the better person. By and large, we tend to shrink away from that harsh light of day. And so we hang on to those artifacts of our minds that keep us forever chained to a view of the world that is not realistic. But we're not here to talk about all the things that hold us down to the earth. This could be a real bummer of a talk if we were. We're here to talk more about what we can do about them, how we can bring ourselves into that harsh light of day in a happy, peaceful, and tranquil way. And so, I've done my best once again to kind of coalesce an awful lot of the Tao Te Ching, more than a fair amount of psychology, a little bit of self-observation, a whole bunch of my own life story, and anything else I could get a hold of to create perhaps an understanding of how that stuff works. I think the first step in any process of change is acceptance. That is, understanding that there's a problem, that there's something within us that needs to change. We have to be able to see the fault as a fault. And when we can see the fault as a fault, then it can be corrected. So, we need to understand that in every life, a little rain must fall. Not every day is going to be, rainbows and cotton candy. It just doesn't work that way. We all, from time to time, are both at the top of the wheel and at the bottom of the wheel. And the trick is simply not to fall off the top or get run over by the bottom. But most of the time, we're somewhere either on the bottom going up or the top coming down. It's the cyclical nature of living. Just knowing that helps us to understand that whatever's going on today may be different tomorrow. And knowing that brings hope. We need to understand the transient nature of all things. When we look at what we own, what we have, the people around us, the things that we love and cherish, the things that we hold on to, we tend to think about those things in a context of some kind of permanence that quite frankly doesn't exist. I'm very keenly aware, and I try to make my family keenly aware of the fact that one of these days, probably several years before any of them, my physical body is going to cease to exist in this place. It's going to happen. And that always causes a bit of an emotional response, but I'm kind of hoping to desensitize my family to that somewhat, because that's as certain as the IRS, right? The two certainties in life, death and taxes. So, from a realistic and hopefully somewhat comical view of the Tao teachings there, we have to understand that even we're transient. There is no permanence. There is nothing that makes us last forever in this existence. And neither does anything else. We need to understand our karmic path. We need to understand what it was we were put here to do, why we're here, and what we need to do to fulfill that mission, that one thing we were supposed to do. And then we need to understand that all things pass. That nothing lasts forever, and in fact, even in our brief span of 70 or 80 years, the situations that we get into day in and day out are all fleeting. They're all extremely transient. And that's actually a wonderful thing. We all spend a a good amount of time overjoyed, and we all spend a bit of time, under crushing discouragement and anxiety. But none of those things has to last forever, and it's very, very wise to understand that, to not allow the good fortune to make us prideful, and not allow the discouraging things to make us too terribly depressed. The other thing that we can do to begin to do something about the negative emotional states is understand and apply the Tao teachings. And here's where we get into just a plethora of chapters of the Tao Te Ching that deal with how we govern our lives. Upstairs, make that dog be quiet, please. The number one thing, in my opinion, and I think I have a good basis in study for this, is unattached action. Anytime we do something with strings and attachments, anytime we do something with a vested interest in the outcome of what we're doing, anytime we do something where we set an expectation for some other person or for something else to occur, we set the stage for an abject failure and an awful lot of negativity. Once again, those illusions of power and ownership or control will catch up with us, and they will. And so with attachments come almost automatically that level of anxiety and stress and negativity when things don't work out the way we thought they should have. When we act without attachments, we give up the need for that outcome. We give up that vested interest. We give up that need for other people to do or be what we want them to do or be. We give up the need to have things go our way. And once that need's given up, we no longer have to worry about what happens. All we have to do is do what we do correctly, rightly, and properly, and then withdraw. And in all things, if we can give up those attachments, those desires, the need to control or to impose our will, the need for things to go a particular way, we get rid of so much stress and anxiety and worry that act alone makes the weight of those attachments much, much, much lighter. The second thing we need to understand is compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for other people, the realization that not everybody's going to be or do what we want. But even though they don't, they too are still just souls on the path, just like us, trying to find their ways home. So we don't have to judge them so harshly, nor do we have to look towards them with condescension and derision, but rather with oneness and understanding that the good person can be the teacher of the bad, and the bad person the resource of the good. That we all are simply trying to figure out what we're supposed to do in this life and what might happen to us when this life is over. Those two questions, I believe, are nearly universal. And understanding that gives us a tremendous depth of compassion that means that we no longer have to insist that other people do or be what we want them to do or be. Further, we need to understand ourselves, and perhaps this more importantly than anything else. We need to understand what motivates us, what drives us to form the attachments that we form, to hold on to the desires that we hold on to. We need to understand the reasons why we become discouraged, why we fail, why we fall down. If we never engage that process of brutal introspection and self-honesty, then we never develop the ability to correct the things that hurt us. A person who understands others is strong But a person who understands himself is powerful. It's just everywhere. And finally, we need to learn to dare not to meddle. Lao Tzu speaks about this over and over and over and over, and yet it is probably the single largest problem with human beings as a species, is that we cannot keep our noses out of other human beings' business. I have to remind myself on a semi-frequent basis that meddling in the affairs of others is the quickest and easiest way to just an entire boatload of problems. It is phenomenal, the amount of anxiety and the number of problems I have caused myself by well-meaning meddling in the affairs of other people. And so these days, I make a concerted effort not to do that. I'm not always successful. I'm certainly no sage. But I am becoming increasingly more aware of the dangers of meddling as every day goes by. It's one thing if somebody asks me to help, but even then, depending on the situation, I may be useful, or I may be inviting another entire boatload of grief into my life simply by becoming involved in a situation that does not require my assistance. And most people don't want that assistance to begin with, even if they do ask for it. It's the old situation where one person involved in a relationship asks for help with another person involved in the relationship, and you're stuck between the two of them, so no matter what you say or what you do, you wind up making somebody mad, and you'll lose a couple of friends in the end. Everybody said they wanted you to dig in there and help them, but when you helped them, then no matter what happens, you're wrong in the eyes of somebody. So, based on things like that and an awful lot of humbling personal experience, we just cannot meddle in the affairs of others. There is no payoff for doing that. So having explored perhaps a bit of the psychology behind our negativity, what do we do? What do we do to improve the situation for ourselves? Well, okay, first of all, we have to acknowledge that our emotional states are what they are. Those feelings are genuine, they're real. Okay, the trick is in knowing those feelings are there and being able to do something about them. We have to learn to realize that initial feeling may not be as important as the knee-jerk reaction it may cause. Ultimately, it's what we say and what we do that invite or bypass the negative emotional states and all of the grief and trauma that goes along with them. And we can choose to make it different. We can acknowledge that we feel hurt or angry or slighted or whatever, and then we can turn right back around and say, but there is no reason to feel that way. Why can I say that? Well, because I am not just this person dwelling in this physical body. There is a true self inside of me, an enlightened Bill, if you will, waiting to get out of me. And that individual, that true self, is beyond hurt. It's beyond conflict. It is beyond all of the things that affect the earthly Bill, because it is not derived from the earthly Bill. It is separate. It is distinct. It is enlightened. It is radiant and wonderful, and it is not subject to the quirks and foibles of this existence. That's actually a pretty cool thing. And it isn't just myself that falls into that category. That's every person on this planet. And so we can practice choosing to feel differently. We can learn to redirect the negative thoughts and emotions and feelings towards a more positive outlook. We can understand, as I said earlier, that we all are souls walking down that path trying to find our way home. And that helps us not to engage that knee-jerk response that most of us feel when somebody does something that makes us angry or hurt or slighted or whatever, so that we can be the more compassionate and kinder us. And while we're being gentler and kinder with everybody else, we need to be gentle and kind with ourselves. It is important to be able to realize that we make our own mistakes, but we try to correct them, and that we are as worthy of forgiveness and tolerance as the next person. And as cultivators of the Tao, it is right and appropriate that we be harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. That we view ourselves with complete and utter honesty. But it doesn't mean we have to beat ourselves senseless. It simply means we have to correct the flaws. We have to see the faults for what they are and do our best to fix them. And that can be done without feeling worthless or discouraged. You know, I say, with great regularity on Sundays, how often I fall down on my way to cultivating these teachings. I've been at this for years, and I still very often am astounded by how much I don't know and how limited my understanding is at times. But I don't use that as a reason to think of myself as without worth or as untrainable. I use that as a motivator to apply some effort in those areas in my life that aren't coming out quite the way I want them to. Okay? We can all allow the occasional negative emotion to be used as that motivator for positive change. It shows us what we need to do something about. Excuse me. And further, we need to discard the old habits and old ways of thinking. I have a tickle in my throat. Pardon me. There are so many chapters that deal with tranquility, peacefulness, governance, returning to the true nature, and attaining oneness with the Tao. Pardon me. That it isn't possible to cite them all here. But the Tao Te Ching is available online, and those verses are all there. Excuse me. I inhaled half a glass of water. Oh, I apologize. Since those are all there for the reading, make use of them. Make use of the older Tao brothers and sisters. Make use of the knowledge that's available. And remember, you are the sovereign, just like I am. You have the ability to make your life whatever you wish. Pardon. Goodness. So, having gone through all of that, let's talk just a bit about desires and attachments. If I can do that without inhaling another gallon of water. Most of the troubles in our lives arise from our desires and our attachments. And the more strongly attached we are to a particular item or a particular way of being, the more we're affected by the things that affect that thing, right? When something negative happens to something with which we have a strong attachment or desire, we feel it. The more strongly that we desire something, the more discouraged and deflated we get when we can't have it, can't get it, can't do it, whatever. This is a recurring theme in the Tao Te Ching, and it is so because it's the truth. Lao Tzu speaks volumes about unattached action and giving up desires. The ancients knew these emotional states are troublemakers for people. That hasn't changed in 2,000 years or more. But instead of dwelling on what we don't have or what we lost or what we can't get or the downside of some social interaction where we got into an argument or a debate or lost a discussion or something, we can focus on making that encounter a lesson that brings us one step closer to oneness with the Tao of Heaven. That alteration from seeing the glass as half empty to seeing it as half full can completely alter the way we think about living. And that's a good thing to do. So, just as we are the source of most of our problems, we are also the source for the solutions to the problems. And practicing the Tao teachings helps us to replace that negativity with the positive or more positive way of thinking and doing things that lead us down that path to the Tao. It isn't necessarily the elimination of all the desires and attachments. I'm not sure that's possible to achieve. But the moderation of those things is absolutely critical to our success. So let me wrap up here real quick. I'm about 2 minutes over. Everyone experiences negative emotions and feelings sometimes. It's part of the human condition. It's part of who and what we are. But we get to choose how we will respond to negativity when it arises, whether it's within ourselves or whether it's being inflicted upon us by others. It doesn't make any difference. We get to choose what we do about it. And as we can choose how we respond, we can choose not to propagate that negativity to other people. And when we do that, perhaps just not passing that negativity along may help us to see ourselves and our situation in a better light. And we can choose to see all things in their most positive light if we want to. Even the biggest disasters and calamities that occur in our lives have an upside to them somewhere. Nothing is 100% positive or 100% negative, even though we may have to look really hard for that upside, for that positivity in some situations. And we can learn to change ourselves, how we think, how we live, what we do, what we expose ourselves to, so that we don't incur as much negativity on our way down the path. That is completely possible and within the scope of our ability to do. We are the sovereigns of our own lives. So hopefully this discussion was useful and helpful. I find thinking about these things always helps me kind of adjust my own thinking and my own way of doing things a little bit more every time I go through them. Maybe that'll do something for someone else as well. Thank you all very much and have a wonderful Sunday.